Hi, folks. This is Richard Parr joining you from London. It's fantastic to have the opportunity, even in these very difficult circumstances, to contribute and to be a part of this effective altruism global event. And it's awesome that we're able to still get together, even if it's over a screen rather than in person, and keep our community strong and engaged and up to date on all of the great work that so many of us in the community are doing. I work as Managing Director of the Good Food Institute Europe. We're a non-profit which works to promote alternative proteins. And I'm going to be talking today about the prospects and opportunities and challenges that alternative proteins face around the world, and trying to set out some of the work that me and some of my colleagues are doing to drive forward progress on alternative proteins in the interests of health, animal welfare, and the planet. And I'm going to be presenting today to the title of Taking Good Food Global. I'm going to be talking about the international work that we're doing and colleagues are doing to drive forward progress on alternative proteins all around the world. By way of a very quick introduction, the Good Food Institute is a family of philanthropically funded non-profits working to create a sustainable, healthy, and just global food system. We were established in the US about 4 years ago now, but we're looking globally and expanding to drive greater mission impact, greater outcomes, greater change all across the world for our food system. Probably most people listening may already know a bit about our theory of change, but I'll recap it quickly just in case. We believe that three main sets of objectives are at stake here. Firstly is public health and the well-being of people. Secondly is the well-being of the billions of animals raised for food around the world that exist at any one time. And thirdly is the sustainability and the long-term health of our planet. So it's for those three objectives that we think alternative proteins are important. A brief outline of the challenge. Conventional animal agriculture is a significant contributor to some of the world's most pressing problems. Firstly, global food security. Growing crops to feed them to farm animals is inherently inefficient, driving up the price of grains and legumes and entrenching global poverty. Secondly, environmental degradation. Conventional animal agriculture is a top contributor to climate change, water depletion and pollution, rainforest destruction, and loss of biodiversity. Thirdly, and pressingly, antibiotic resistance. The vast majority of antibiotics used are administered to farm animals, and this is accelerating the evolution of antibiotic-resistant bacteria. Fourthly, and importantly, conventional animal agriculture subjects animals, billions of animals, to extreme confinement, trauma, and painful mutilations. So there's a whole host of reasons why we think a transition and reform of the global food system is important. Now, at this time, there's one question on all of our minds, and that's how can we, as well as respond to the devastating current pandemic, how can we prevent future pandemics emerging? Now, this is a big topic, and I'm not going to make it the focus of my talk, but just quickly to note that many disease outbreaks, as we know, are zoonotic, originating in animals and then crossing the species barrier to humans. And many of these zoonotic diseases are linked to animals raised for food. Obvious examples are avian influenza from chickens and other birds, and swine influenza from pigs. Now, in the long term, reforming the way we produce meat has the potential to make a contribution to a reduced risk of cross-species disease spread. This is a big topic, and I would encourage anyone who's interested in considering it further to check out a very thoughtful and well-informed article written recently in Wired magazine by Liz Speck, PhD, who is GFI's Associate Director of Science and Technology. and the hyperlink given on the slide will allow you to find that. Now, thinking back to all four of these challenges outlined previously, we think that an important part of the answer to those challenges lies in alternative proteins. Brief definitions: plant-based meat, which is a combination of proteins, fats, minerals, and water, all the components of animal meat sourced directly from plants. And then there's cultivated or cell-based meat, which is meat produced from a small sample of animal cells replicated outside of the animal. Now, these two ways of producing meat have got the potential to deliver all of the pleasure and satisfaction and cultural significance that many people find in conventional meat, but deliver it in a much more sustainable and compassionate manner. We think promoting these things is a really important part of the road towards a more sustainable, just and kind food system. At the Good Food Institute, we work in three main ways to improve and to drive forward progress on these technologies. We work directly with scientists in order to drive forward the scientific breakthroughs which are needed to really bring the full potential of these interventions to scale. We work directly with companies to get more existing companies stocking these products and selling these products, and also to drive the creation of new companies, new entrepreneurs, new investment in the sector. Thirdly, and very importantly, we work to promote a supportive policy environment for these things. We started about 4 years ago in the US and have built up an incredible set of expertise and an incredible track record of impact. But as an organization which is driven by outcomes and by an optimizing mindset, a mindset which is familiar to many in the EA community, we want to drive not just a US-focused reform of the food system, but a global one. And to that end, GFI has established a series of affiliates around the world in Brazil, India, Israel, Europe, and in Asia Pacific. And we work to strategically magnify and enlarge the impact that we have around the world. What I want to talk about in this talk today is quickly to run through some of those regions and to indicate and talk about some of the unique context of promoting alternative proteins in those regions, to identify some of the things which we think are priority areas for intervention, and to outline some plans for the future. Firstly, to start with Europe, the part of the world that I know the most. Why is Europe so important for driving global change? Firstly, there's an absolutely massive set of human capital in Europe in terms of scientific expertise, in terms of entrepreneurial drive and vision, and in terms also not just of human capital, but of financial capital. There's massive potential here. It's got a market, a population size twice that of the US, so it's a significant consumer of meat, eggs, dairy, and seafood. And also the stakes here are very high. There is a real, we're at a real kind of fork in the road, I think. And there is a genuine chance that the outlook for alternative proteins could either go really well, or it could run into a series of roadblocks and risks. And so we think against the counterfactual that taking action and intervening in Europe has got the potential for very high impact. To talk through some of the main challenges which alternative proteins face, and from that, some of the work that I've been focused on to drive progress. We think that there are basically three key obstacles that need to be overcome to see alternative proteins come to scale and the impact that we want. Firstly, is scientific, and actually ensuring that we can get scientific breakthroughs that are needed to create better and cheaper products for people to enjoy. Secondly, in Europe is regulation and ensuring that these products can fairly come to market. And finally, consumer acceptance and consumer attitudes. And to that end, public engagement is really important. Some of the examples that GFI Europe has managed to drive change on over the last year include we have a big focus has been to encourage the European public funding sector to engage and to invest in alternative proteins research and development. The EU is about to sign off a 100 billion euro program over the next 7 years of research and innovation. We think there's a very strong case for a chunk of that money to be invested in alternative proteins R&D. And just within the last few months, we've actually had an important example of progress on that front, which is through our engagement with EIT, which is a major EU funding agency. We have worked with them and managed to encourage them successfully to make alternative proteins one of their priority funding areas for calls for action for 2021. This is just a first step. There's a long way to go, but it shows, I think, that this is a tractable and a doable endeavor. Another important thing we've been working on is fighting back against some of the proposals which have come forward, echoing those which have been put forward in the US and elsewhere in the world, which would seek to censor and to ban terms such as veggie burger or vegan sausage roll, put forward by a small minority of MEPs in the European Parliament. And we have been working with other like-minded organizations to push back against this irrational proposed restriction on what you can call plant-based products. We have had some success in prompting relevant decision makers to pause a little bit and reconsider some of these proposals, but we're right at the beginning of what will be a long and a taxing fight on this. And although we've made some initial progress, there's a lot more work to do, and that will be a big focus of our work in Europe going forward. Another thing that we've been doing is trying to inform and enlighten the public debate and discourse on alternative proteins, engaging with mass media. We had a really encouraging success recently when New Scientist magazine, which is the main UK-based serious popular science magazine, devoted their editorial page to endorsing the call for radically increased investment, public investment from governments in research and development for alternative proteins. So a good example of some of the success that we've been able to drive. But all of these things, we're right at the beginning of a journey. There's a lot of work that needs to be done on all of these factors and more. And it's something that we really relish the fight for and plan to get stuck into hard over the coming years. Another critically important region, clearly, for the success of efforts to reform the global food system is the Asia-Pacific region, where Elaine Hsu leads a fantastic team of 6 people in GFI Asia-Pacific. It goes without saying, and is no surprise to members of the EA community, that the sheer scale of the global population, the proportion of the global population in Asia Pacific makes it an absolutely critical arena where the global impact and prospects of alternative proteins will essentially be decided, and so is just critically important to get right. Elaine has been doing incredible work, including publishing the China Plant-Based Meat Industry Report, which is the first ever document and product which sets out the state of the China-based plant-based meat sector, and provides a foundation for more investor, corporate, and startup engagement. Elaine and her team have been helping to frame conversations around alternative proteins through public speaking, media exposure, and in-person meetings. And her team have also supported the growth of plant-based and cultivated meat startups to create products suitable for the Asian market through strategic advice, connections, and publishing, creating resources such as the Hong Kong and Singapore editions of the Startup Manual, which are fantastic go-to guides for anyone that wants to know how to create from scratch an exciting and profitable and impactful plant-based or cultivated meat startup. And so that's an example really of taking collateral which has been started off in the US and adapting it for the specific context of a different region. Going forward, Elaine has identified focusing on novel food ingredients focused on Asian cuisine. Clearly, in the US, burgers has been where the product sector where the plant-based progress has been quickest, with Impossible Burger and Beyond, etc. That the proportion of burgers that are eaten in the Asia-Pacific region is much lower, and the shape of people's diets and cuisine is different. And so a big focus that Elaine is working on in Asia is how to drive and accelerate innovation in food ingredients and types which are adapted to and focused on the Asian palate. In terms of context, of course, Asia Pacific can probably claim to be the great grandmother and father of plant-based meat. There's actually a very rich sector that goes back millennia of what's called mock meats, and all of that is that comes with certain that is different from the direct sensory mimicking products which exist today. Hopefully, is a cause for optimism about the prospects of alternative proteins in Asia. Other priorities for Elaine and her team to work on are mapping technical barriers and white spaces, supporting the creation of solutions through R&D projects and industry collaboration, encouraging scientists and researchers to advance R&D on alternative proteins, dramatically increasing the number of researchers and the amount of government money invested in alternative protein and R&D. And you are seeing certain Asia-Pacific governments really taking an interest in going big on this. Singapore springing to mind, particularly where because of its focus on food security and high tech and innovation, they've been pretty forward-leaning on this. And ditto actually on ensuring that cultivated meat can come to market in at least one Asian jurisdiction, if not more, by 2020, and making that launch a success. These are some of the things which Elaine and her team will be prioritizing in the years to come. Huge potential for impact there. Turning to India, and many, I suspect, people will know Varun Deshpande, who leads GFI India and who is also a stalwart of the effective altruism community, and in many ways the driver and founder of the EA movement in India. Why is India important, particularly important for the future of alternative proteins? Obviously, population, no need to say any more about that, an enormous and growing proportion of the global population. India also plays a crucial role and has a crucial potential to be a spearhead for alternative proteins throughout the developing world in terms of South-South cooperation between India and other developing countries, and really providing a role model and a testing ground for this sector. Also, Varun has identified that the work that he's doing is particularly important perhaps in India, because the counterfactual is basically, I summarize, but the sector pretty much didn't exist and won't grow nearly as fast if it wasn't for Varun and his team really making connections and driving this forward. So that's another reason why the work that he's doing is so particularly important. In terms of work that Varun and team have done so far, They recently hosted the very successful second version of the Future of Protein Summit, which was an excellent conference which had over 400 speakers and attendees, and really is the crucible which is driving forward the creation of the alternative protein sector in India. Varun has delivered incredible results already, including working with the government of India to secure $640,000 US of cultivated mutton research, which is a type of meat which is particularly enjoyed in India, and also working with the government of India and other players to drive forward the creation of a research centre for cultivated meat. Aside from engagement with policymakers, Varun's also been successful in engaging senior leadership at over 25 major corporations in India, supporting the startup ecosystem, educating investors, and speaking at prominent industry events. In terms of looking forward, GFI India is working on the launch of a mission for smart protein in partnership with government agencies, corporations, universities, and philanthropies. Again, it all comes back basically to driving the creation, catalyzing the creation of the alternative protein sector in India. And to that end, GFI India is looking to set up a startup incubator to take nascent and newly formed alternative protein companies and really give them the kickstart, the expertise, the introductions that they need to succeed and to reach scale. GFI India is also going to be advising companies on the development of corporate innovation facilities and fostering the publication of pivotal market and consumer research. We're also planning to establish a scientific research grant program to accelerate technology transfer for alternative proteins in India. Clearly, the science base of India very strong, and if we can get more Indian scientists working on creative breakthroughs we need, that could really help drive the global acceleration of scientific progress on alternative proteins. And GFI India will also be funding original research in economics, food systems, sustainability, and policy. Turning to Israel, from one of the world's largest countries to one of the smallest, but still critically important, Israel being an absolute tech powerhouse and one of the most innovative and dynamic countries across the tech sector, but particularly also in food technology, and actually the home of many of the most important startups which are driving, modern startups, established companies, e.g. Aleph Farms on the cultivated side, who are really leading the way on this. Near, who came on board just a few months ago, has already helped to drive and work with the Israeli government to plan for a national food institute, which will allow cutting-edge food innovation. The team have worked with all of the big food companies in Israel in order to target their R&D resources toward alternative proteins. And GFI and NIR and Co have held and participated in dozens of events, creating a name for GFI Israel as Israel's thought leader in this field. We're very lucky to have Tom on board as senior scientist, who is a genius level thinker and driver of science research, and is one of the most respected players in this field, and is really driving things forward strongly in Israel. Looking forward, the team wants to compile a national plan for making Israel a top global alternative proteins R&D center. They're aiming to stimulate academic research through intense engagement with leading institutions, giving courses and lectures, organizing events, and building student groups. Commensurate with the scientific expertise and focus of the team, they're looking to create a fund for PhD students, specifically targeting alternative protein research, and therefore generating significant additional research in the field. And they think the GFI Israel team is going to be, helping to drive significantly more scientific breakthroughs coming out of Israel. And the team is also looking to engage at a policy level with the Israeli government with the objective of encouraging the Israeli government to commit to become a global leader in alternative proteins R&D. So together with Or, Hadass, and Lior, Nir and Tom are really making incredible progress in Israel. Last but very much not least, and zipping all over the globe, turning now to Latin America and Brazil as one of the crucial arenas for alternative proteins work. Clearly, Brazil, the economic powerhouse of Latin America, and also, as we know, a place where meat is enjoyed and where meat is produced at scale. Brazil, GFI, led by the fantastic Gus in Brazil, who has basically, without wanting to exaggerate too much, over the last 2 or 3 years, basically helped to move the Brazilian alternative protein sector from essentially non-existence towards an absolute ton of product launches and a ton of new entrants, not just to the local Brazilian plant-based meat market, but actually also increasingly encouraging them to export and to go global. There's a ton of specific examples, a good one being the Futuro burger, which was the first real next-generation plant-based burger sold in Brazil. And Gus and his team were in at the ground level of interacting with the company that launched that to provide them advice and guidance and to encourage them to move into the plant-based sector, and is a huge success and now going global. Gus and his team have engaged with many leading companies, including some of the largest animal product corporations in the world, playing a key role in successful national and global launches of their plant-based products. Also, with the advice of Alexandra Cabral, has worked to successfully engage with the Brazilian government on important things such as a regulatory process for both plant-based and cultivated meat. And Gus has built a strong partnership with Brazil's National Public Agriculture Research Institute, Embrapa, to stimulate scientific research on alternative proteins. Looking forward, Gus is planning to expand that work with a particular focus on the regulatory agenda, with the goal of making Brazil one of the first 5 countries to fully regulate cultivated meat. The team in Brazil is looking to stimulate local research through partnership with Embrapa and helping researchers secure government grant funds. Plans to continue to work with the Brazilian industry, investors and startups to launch excellent products widely available at a competitive price. Gus and team will be coordinating corporate-funded research consortia with the potential to significantly alter product cost, availability and taste texture of these products. And importantly, accelerating global competition in the industry by increasing the number of Brazilian companies selling at a competitive price point on the global market. So that concludes our world tour of alternative proteins, from covering pretty much every region of the world, covering countries large and small, covering histories, geographies, languages, cultures, which differ widely, and each of which present unique both challenges but also opportunities for the alternative protein sector. At GFI, we're very, very excited about driving forward this work. One of our great values is working in partnership with other like-minded organizations and individuals. So if anyone listening to this, if any of your ears have pricked up at all, if any of this has been of interest, if you spot particular opportunities, if you want to help, if you want to support us in any way to accelerate this work, if you can offer introductions, if you want to start up a company yourself, if you want to offer talent, time, resources, money, volunteering, if you just want to find out more and enter into our enter into our orbit and be kept up to date on the latest news from GFI US and the GFI Global affiliates, please do reach out to me on richardp@gfi.org. And we'd be really excited to work with you going forward and to continue to drive positive reforms of the global food system with the objective of helping people, helping the planet, and helping animals. So thank you very much, and look forward to staying in touch with people who've been listening to this. Thank you. Okay, folks, thank you very much for bearing with me and listening on that presentation. I hope it was a fun whistle-stop tour of literally the world of alternative proteins. At GFI, as I said, we are keen to engage and to work with anyone and everyone who shares our values and shares our objectives of accelerating progress on alternative proteins. So please, if anything that I've said, or if anything that Zach and Amy on the previous GFI presentation have said has tickled your interest or caught your imagination, please do feel free to reach out to us. We're always looking for assistance, support, donations, solidarity, working together, ideas, introductions to networks, etc. This is a very, very big challenge, and it's going to take much more than just us as individuals or us even as one organization working on it. It needs a network, and it needs a team of people to get to the place that we want to be. So please do reach out to me if you are interested in engaging and finding out more. And I hope that people enjoy the rest of this virtual conference. And I hope at this time of challenge that we can at least make a crack on with making some positive changes on all the agendas that we care about. So thank you very much.